They're not afraid of dying. They're afraid of who comes to collect them when they do. These chilling words from a young patient sent shivers down a young nurse's spine. After 12-hour shifts in the pediatric ward, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, Nat began noticing a pattern. Children from different rooms whispered about the same visitor, the doctor with the blue pin who appears after midnight. Tonight, Nat will share what happened when multiple children started seeing the doctor, and why it made him question everything he believed about life after death.
I began my first night shift at Memorial Children's Hospital with the usual routine. I checked vitals, administered medications, and monitored the quiet hallways of the pediatric ward. After 3 years on day shifts, I'd switched to nights for the better pay. The pediatric ward was typically peaceful after hours. Most children slept through the night, with an occasional waking for medication or comfort. That changed when Emma, a 6-year-old recovering from appendicitis, woke up screaming at 2 a.m. I rushed to her room and found her sitting upright, eyes wide with terror. "He was here," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Blackcoat with the cold hands. He touched my forehead and said I wasn't ready yet. I checked her temperature and adjusted her blankets. "It was just a bad dream, Emma. The medication can sometimes cause nightmares." Emma shook her head firmly. "No, he was real. He had a blue pin on his coat, a blue circle with a star in it, and his hands were so cold they hurt." I noted the details in her chart but didn't think much of it. Children have vivid imaginations, especially when medicated and in unfamiliar surroundings. I calmed her down and stayed until she fell asleep again. 2 nights later, Liam, an 8-year-old boy with pneumonia, called out for help around 3 a.m. When I arrived, he described seeing a tall doctor in an old-fashioned black coat standing at the foot of his bed. "He had this weird pin," Liam said, "blue with a star, and he was holding something like scissors but bigger. He said I was getting better and didn't need him yet." The similarity to Emma's description caught my attention. These children were on different floors and had never met. Over the next week, 2 more children, a 4-year-old girl with leukemia and a 10-year-old boy recovering from surgery, reported similar sightings. All described the same figure, tall, wearing an outdated black doctor's coat, with a distinctive blue pin and unusually cold hands. Most disturbing was how they mentioned seeing an antique bone saw, an instrument not used in modern medicine. I began noticing other things. The temperature in rooms would drop significantly before a child reported a sighting. Medical equipment would malfunction briefly, monitors glitching, lights flickering. Once, I found all the cabinets in the medicine room open when I was certain I'd closed them. When I asked the children to draw what they saw, their pictures were unnervingly similar. Each showed a tall figure with a blurred face, wearing a long coat with bloodstains near the cuffs. The blue pin was prominently featured, always on the left lapel. My rational explanations started to wear thin. These children had different backgrounds, different conditions, different medications, yet they all saw the same figure with details too specific to be coincidental. I finally approached the night administrator, a woman who'd worked at the hospital for 30 years. She seemed uncomfortable with my questions, glancing over her shoulder before whispering, "Search for Dr. Blackcoat in the yearbook from the 1950s. In the dusty records room, I found sparse documentation about a surgeon who matched the descriptions perfectly. He wore a distinctive blue pin from a now-defunct medical society and specialized in terminal cases, particularly children. As I dug deeper, I noticed something unsettling. The children's sightings all occurred around 3 in the morning. Staff had begun whispering about 3:33 a.m. as the dead hour, when the temperature would drop and equipment would fail. That night, I decided to wait and watch. I chose the room of Tommy, a 7-year-old with terminal leukemia who had mentioned seeing the cold doctor the previous night. I sat in the corner, determined to see for myself what was happening in those early morning hours. I couldn't stop thinking about those hospital records and decided I needed to learn more about Dr. Blackcoat's history at Memorial. The following morning, I tracked down Hank, a janitor who'd worked at Memorial for over 4 decades. When I mentioned Dr. Blackcoat, his face turned ashen. "Where'd you hear that name?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Hank agreed to help me access the basement archives after his shift. "There's stuff down there they don't want found," he told me. "Old records before everything went digital." That night, Hank led me through a maze of corridors to a section of the basement I hadn't known existed. He unlocked a heavy door with a key from his massive ring and left me alone with the hospital's buried secrets. Inside, I discovered records sealed in 1957, the year Dr. Malcolm Blackcoat vanished from hospital documentation. The files revealed a brilliant surgeon who pioneered experimental procedures in pediatric medicine. His specialty was terminal cases, children other doctors had given up on. One detail made me freeze. The current pediatric ward, where most of the sightings occurred, was once his private operating theatre. The hospital had renovated and repurposed the space in the 1980s. As I read further, the records grew more disturbing. Patient deaths increased in Blackcoat's final years. Parents complained of procedures performed without proper consent. Several files mentioned children waking during surgery, describing Blackcoat whispering to them as they drifted in and out of consciousness. The most damning evidence came from a 1957 internal investigation that never reached the public. Records showed he vanished after a hushed investigation into radical pediatric trials. According to the final report, after being confronted with allegations of unauthorized experiments, Blackcoat did himself with an unknown substance in his office, the room that was now the pediatric playroom. His body was found wearing his signature black coat and blue pin. I connected more dots that night. Every child who reported seeing Dr. Blackcoat was either terminally ill or had been near death before recovering. The closer they were to dying, the more vivid their encounters. I borrowed a small camera from security and installed it in the room of 7-year-old Toby, whose leukemia had recently stopped responding to treatment. His doctors had given him weeks to live. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. At 3:33 a.m., the room temperature dropped drastically, visible as sudden condensation on the window. The corner darkened, a shape formed beside Toby's bed, and a whisper too soft to catch came through the audio. When I visited Toby that evening, he looked at me with eyes too knowing for a child. "The doctor with the cold hands said he's coming for me tonight," Toby said calmly. "He wants to try something new to fix me." "Did he tell you his name?" I asked, my heart racing. "Dr. Blackcoat. He said he's been waiting for someone like me for a long time, someone brave enough for his special procedure." I couldn't let Toby face this alone. Whatever Dr. Blackcoat was, ghost, memory, or something science couldn't explain, I needed to be there. I decided to stand guard in Toby's room that night. The brilliant, disturbed surgeon who believed he could conquer death itself was somehow, 60 years after his suicide, still trying to prove his theories, one dying child at a time. I checked my watch. 10:45 p.m. I settled into the chair beside Toby's bed, determined to witness whatever came through that door at 3:33 a.m. The minutes ticked by as I watched over Toby, my senses heightened to every shadow and sound in the room. The air grew colder with each passing moment, and I pulled my sweater tighter around me. The monitors beside Toby's bed began to flicker, their digital readouts jumping erratically. At 3:33 a.m., the shadows in the corner thickened and took shape. A tall figure emerged, wearing an outdated black coat with a blue pin on the lapel. His hands were pale, almost translucent, and he carried what looked like an antique bone saw. "You don't belong here," I said, voice shaking. The figure turned. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. Gaunt, with hollow eyes that held no light, his skin had a blue-grey tinge, like someone who'd been underwater too long. "This child is ready," he said, his voice a dry whisper. "My work must continue." "Your work ended 60 years ago," I replied. "You can't help these children anymore." He stared at me, then at Toby. Something like sadness crossed his face before he simply dissolved, the shadows receding as if pulled by an unseen current. Toby's condition improved mysteriously that night. The doctors called it spontaneous remission, rare but documented in medical literature. Within weeks, his leukemia had retreated to undetectable levels. The medical team was baffled but elated. I wasn't the only one who'd encountered something in that ward. Other nurses, doctors, even cleaning staff reported strange occurrences. Equipment malfunctions, temperature drops, whispers in empty rooms. I never told anyone what I saw that night. Who would believe me?
Nat tells me that the operating theater-turned-ward now sits empty. Its door locked, its windows frosted, and strange whispering when the clock nears 3:33 a.m. The hospital administration cited persistent maintenance issues as the reason for closing it permanently. Nat still works nights at Memorial. He's learned to trust what he sees and hears in the quiet hours when the boundary between worlds thins. Some nights, when the lights flicker and the monitors glitch, he swears he hears the surgeon's voice whispered down the hall. If you've ever heard a hospital ghost story of your own, share it below.